दिखाई दे रहा है।
दिखाई दे रहा है ना? ठीक ठीक ठीक, गुड। सो हम लोग लास्ट वीक जो डिस्कस किए थे अबाउट द वेरियस इंटरनेशनल बिजनेस एनवायरमेंटल फैक्टर्स and how international business have grown and all those. Today we will be discussing, and we have also discussed, thanks to the new policies and principles which have been started by Indian government, there will be new outlooks which will come to the domain of international business. So before going to that aspect, today I will be discussing about international trade theory. When we talk about international trade or international business, we basically talk about that there should be some business which will be going on between two parties in two different countries or two different continents. There are some standardized theories which devise the aspect of the international trade. So today we will be discussing about those theories. We will also discuss about, before discussing the theories, we will also discuss some basic terminologies which are being associated with international trade theory. So when we talk about international trade theory and terminologies, a very important parameter which talks about is the aspect of import and export. So as we all know, when import means it is coming inside, export means it's going outside. So any Indian organization doing business outside and sending the products outside, that becomes export. And any organization which is coming inside to India and serving the Indian consumers, just like Google or any other thing, that becomes import. The import or export or international trade takes care with the aspect of these two aspects. One is merchandise and the other one is service. That means one is tangible and the other one is intangible. Thanks to digitization, we are seeing a huge growth in the aspect of the service industry. So whether we talk about IT, whether we talk about banks, whether we talk about financial services, whether we talk about consulting, these are all services industries. When we talk about manufacturing of mobile phones, when we talk about manufacturing of cars, laptops, steel products, that talks about the tangible products which are being defined as merchandise. So Vivo have their plant in India and producing the various types of products. That basically leads to the aspect of Vivo being a Chinese organization doing their manufacturing in India. So that means India will be growing and they will be doing business of selling the phones to Indian consumers. So the profit what India will get is, it's not only the consumers will be getting a product, but also the Indian economy will grow because you have a manufacturing aspect which is contributing for the development of the Indian economy. I hope you will remember that previously when we were buying, I remember as a consumer, previously when we were buying, say, a Motorola phone or a Lenovo phone, the product mobile phone is being written on the top of the box was made in China. But nowadays it is being written as made in India, the same brand. That means when we talk about made in India, it is helping the Indian economy to grow, because when you are having the organizations here, your job prospects will grow, more raw materials, and all those aspects will help the Indian economy to grow. So this is the objective of the Make in India campaign, which had been taken care of, which also had contributed a lot for the development of international trade across India. When we talk about multinational corporations, that means MNCs, we basically talk about two types of MNCs. One is an Indian MNC and one is a non-Indian MNC. So when we talk about Indian organizations doing business outside, then that is an Indian MNC. When we talk about outside organizations doing business in India, that becomes a non-Indian MNC. Say, for example, you talk about Infosys. Infosys is an organization which is belonging from India and it is doing business outside India also. So it is an Indian MNC. But when you talk about Google doing business in India, that becomes a non-Indian MNC working in India. But both are MNCs because they are multinational corporations, organizations where they are in multinationals, more than one nation. So that becomes a MNC. International trade defines the aspect of these multinational corporations. Now, if you see this table, you will find this table talks about some countries in the world which are top 10 merchandise exporters, right? You find Germany, you find China, you find US, you find so many countries, right? In the top table, you are not finding the aspect of India here. Sorry. In this table, you are finding India in the 9th position. India in the 9th position. Just you are finding India here. Here there is no India. When you talk about this, you are also not getting India, right? So the difference between these two is that you are getting the leading trading stores. These are all the with respect to the trading factors. I hope all of you know the meaning of trading and manufacturing. Trading means it's only selling. It's a sort of a reselling aspect. So with respect to that, this is the context. With respect to the manufacturing aspect, India is there in the top 10 with respect to the export value, which actually takes care with respect to India. Now, if you see this diagram or this chart, you are finding that with respect to the aspect of, say, uh, the from 1990 to 2008, this is the aspect of GDP growth, and the second pillar is the aspect of the merchandise export growth. So compared to GDP, the merchandise export growth was more. But in 2000, you see, it is drastically more. It had got a drastic jump. It is on the 4, it is on the 10. It's a more than 2.5 times growth. But from 2001, you're seeing a reverse thing that the GDP has grown, but the aspect of Indian exports have went to a negative, right? This is the origin 0, so it is -2, it is on the negative. 2002 grows, 2003 grows, 2004 again you are getting a drastic growth. So that means if you see 98, 2000, 2 years, 2000 to 2004, 4 years, and 2004 to 2008, again 4 years, you are seeing a decline, right? This is a good difference. This is around 10, this is around 4, so 2.5 times. This is around 3, this is around 6, 2 times. This is around 4, this is around 8, 2 times. This is around 4, this is around 6, 1.5 times. But here you see, this is only around 2, this is around 2. It's more or less same or similar in respect of the growth. This, you see the title of the graph, right? Growth in world trade outpaces the growth in world GDP. I'm not talking about India as an overall aspect. I'm talking about world aspect. This proves that international trade had grown post 2K, that means 2000, and it is growing on a positive sense. Although this year there were some difficulties, but after that, if you go to Google, you will find that this is the World Trade Organization website from which I have referred this. You can get the recent data where you will find there is always a growth, and that's the reason why coronavirus have spreaded like anything, because we were all crossing borders from one country to another to access the products. So that proves the growth of international trade as well as the growth of GDP with respect to. Now, there are three more terms which we all need to again know the aspect of deficit, surplus, and balance of trade. Now, when we talk about trade, and if we just go back to the 1700s when Britishers came to India, and I hope we all remember that when Britishers came to India, it was basically they came for business. Eastern India Company, right? They came for business, and slowly the business had grown and they had taken part, and the business had expanded, and they have started ruling India. So from then on, and if you talk about before then or that also, thanks to the Industrial Revolution, a trade was happening across the countries and across the borders. And you would find that the easiest way of starting a business is by aspect of trading. Because those days, service industry was not so much there. If you talk about manufacturing, it definitely talks about more investment, machineries, workers, so many aspects. If you talk about trading, it is the easiest. You take product, add a margin of your own, sell it. So you get an easy sort of business line where your objective is only to sell. Your objective is not to produce or not to manufacture. Your objective is to sell the right product to the right person, and you are working as a middleman. When I talk about this aspect, which is the country, and we talk about trade deficit, that means when a nation imports more than it exports. And when we talk about surplus, that means extra, when a nation exports more than it imports. Now, my question to you is that between trade deficit and trade surplus, at which condition any country will be in a stronger position? Those who want to answer, he or she can unmute the microphone and say, which one is better? Trade deficit is better or trade surplus is better? Hello?
So trade surplus.
Trade surplus, okay.
Yeah.
I hope others are agreeing with that. May I know the reason why trade surplus is better than trade deficit?
Earn better, more revenue then, sir.
You can earn more revenue. Very good. It's a very, very simple way answering the question. I really appreciate this. That when you talk about trade surplus, that means you are exporting more. And if you're exporting more, that means you have sufficient amount of stuffs to serve your own country, and then you are exporting. When you are importing more, that means you're not sufficient enough for serving your own country. Now, when we talk about trade surplus and trade deficit, it depends on the type of product also. It will vary always with respect to X product and Y product. Say, for example, we talk about mangoes, we talk about prawn, we talk about tea, we talk about rice, we talk about cotton. All these aspects, India is having a strong position. When India is having a strong position in selling all these products to the market, then technically speaking, the product should be very less in price with respect to the Indian market. But to our astonishment, we find that the supreme quality of product on any of these categories, and we listen to them also, the supreme qualities, you talk about mango, you talk about the Alfonso, it's a very, very supreme quality. There are so many other varieties also. They are basically being exported a lot, and we as Indians are getting the inferior quality of products. For tea, that's the case. Why? Because that is the aspect of in these 4 or 5 categories, we are strong as an India. So we are having trade surplus. and we are exporting. But in some other aspects and some other perspectives, such as petroleum, we don't have trade surplus, we have trade deficit. So you cannot define trade surplus or trade deficit irrespective of the product category. You should always define the trade surplus or trade deficit dependent on the specific category of the product, what category of product we are talking about. And ultimately, we talks about an equilibrium condition, which basically talks about the balance of trade, whether a country has a trade surplus or trade deficit ultimately leads to a equilibrium condition, which is a balance of trade. So if we go to the next slide, right, we basically divide the trade theories into two parts. One is the classical trade theories, and one is the modern trade theories. In classical trade theories, we talk about these three theories. One is mercantilism theory, absolute advantage theory, comparative advantage theory. These are the three theories which we talk about in case of classical trade theories. And in case of modern trade theories, we talk about product life cycles and strategic trade. I hope you remember about product life cycle. This is the same product life cycle which you have studied in marketing management, the same product life cycle. And strategic trade is the extension of product life cycle and strategic management, which I will discuss a bit later. So I will start with discussion of mercantilism theory, which is the oldest, simplest, and also applied a lot. Now, if you see the aspect of the theory of mercantilism, and if you read this small 3 to 4 sentences, what it says, the wealth of the world, forget about the bracket part, the wealth of the world is fixed, and a nation that exports more and imports less would enjoy the net inflows of gold and silver and thus become richer. International trade is viewed as a zero-sum game. So if you talk about this mercantilism theory, we need to remember aspect of 2 to 3 keywords. The first keyword is the aspect of zero-sum game. The second keyword is wealth of the world. And how you can ask me, which we talk about the gold and silver and richer and all those aspects. Maybe you're getting confused. So I will start with the aspect of wealth of the world. As per this statement, it is being said that the wealth of the world is being measured by gold and silver deposits of the country, which basically states the wealth of the country. And if you take the summation of the wealth of the countries, you get the wealth of the world. So it is about the wealth, about the gold and silver deposits, whatever you are having. According to theory of mercantilism, you see the second sentence, a nation that exports more and imports less would enjoy. That means it is accepting the earlier principle, whatever we have discussed, that a country which exports more, they are in a better condition. A country which exports exports less, definitely that will be on a not so much of a good condition. So it says that if a country exports more, definitely the country will be earning more. If the country earns more, their deposit of gold and silver will be also more. If their deposit of gold and silver will be more, then definitely they will be more richer, more richer. So there are 2 to 3 small steps which you make to understand, right? First is wealth of world or wealth of the country is measured by the deposit of gold and silver. And if a nation or a country exports more, definitely their income increases, their condition improves. If their condition improves, their deposit for gold and silver improves. If their deposit for gold and silver improves, that means the country becomes more richer. And it will be the vice versa case for a country which will be having less export and more import. That means for a more import, their income status will be less. When their income status will be less, their gold and silver deposit will be less. When their gold and silver deposit will be less, definitely they will be poorer. But it is being said by the theory of mercantilism that the total amount of gold and silver in the gold and silver deposit in the world is fixed, is constant. That's the reason why it is being said is fixed. There we will be discussing the negatives of this theory later on in the next theory, but for the time being, please accept this, that the total amount of gold and silver deposit around the world is fixed, as a result of which it says if some country gains something, the other country should lose by that equal amount, otherwise there will be a disbalance. So ultimately, there will be no change. So it is a zero-sum game. So there will be no change ultimately. Ultimately, the change will not happen, and it will be lead to the aspect of a zero-sum game. So the aspect of zero-sum game actually talks about that the total amount of deposit of gold and silver is constant, and if some country gains by 5, then definitely other countries should lose by 5 so that the total remains the same. So there will be no change. There will be no change in the aspect of the total game. So we call it as a zero-sum game. Any doubt? Please respond. Any doubt? Then I will proceed to the next theory.
No, sir. You can proceed.
I can proceed now.
Yes, sir.
So you have understood, all of you? Okay, fine. Good. So the next part which I will be talking about, you see the part protectionism. Now, as you can understand, protectionism, what is coming from? Protect. Protect what? You see the sentence. Idea that government should actively protect the domestic industries from imports and vigorously promote exports. This is a condition which India is going through in the last 1 week, right? We are seeing so much of aspect of when our honorable prime minister have also said in his speech that okay, we will be going for a economic package and we will be promoting our local organizations. I hope you remember in 2000, before 2010, if I'm not wrong, when there were a lot of discussion on our Indian Parliament about whether FDI will be allowed in retail. There were a lot of fight, and it was not being allowed because it will ultimately kill the local organizations, the unorganized retailers. The same way also when the organized retailers came, like Big Bazaar, Reliance, Subida, and so many others, it got a negative impact on the unorganized retailers. The same way, if foreign organizations started coming, then definitely the local organized retailers will be also facing the consequences. There was a lot of debate. They couldn't do anything. And at the end of the day, you have seen last 2 years back, IKEA, which is the world's largest, not only furniture manufacturing, but they manufacture, they are specialized in manufacturing furnitures, as well as they also manufacture so many types of household items, starting from septic paints to needles to so many things, right? They have started their stores in Hyderabad, and the biggest store, and there were a lot of trade on the local retail players also. So it is being said that the government should take care of the domestic businesses by not allowing all the countries to operate, all the organizations from the external countries to operate. From the consumer perspective, it is good. When more organizations come, there will be more competition. So we as consumers will be getting the product at a less price. So it will be good for us. But from the organization perspective, they need to give, they will be going for a less margin, which ultimately will lead to the aspect of less business for them. So maybe they cannot survive. So that is the aspect of protectionism, which talks about the taking care of the concern of the local businesses and saving them from the rush across the globe. Right. The second theory is the aspect of mercantilism, which has been given by Adam Smith, which is called as one of the gurus of economics in 1776. So the wealth of nations. Please read this thing: the inquiry into the nature and causes of wealth of nations. Because when we are talking about the mercantilism, we are talking about wealth of nations. Because the gold deposit, silver deposit, the wealth of nations, and the wealth of country, it should be fixed. So that was the wealth of nation theory. The wealth of nation theory attacked mercantilism, the system of which dominated economic thought in the 1700s. Please go through this point. Smith proved, that means Adam Smith proved, this is a very important factor, wrong the belief that trade was a zero sum game. This is very important. Please remember that. He said that the trade was not a zero sum game, that the gain of one nation from trade was the loss of another. On the other hand, voluntary exchange or trade is also a positive sum game. Both nations can gain. So he is contradicting that theory of mercantilism and said that it's not the quantity of is fixed, it is flexible. It does not mean that if someone gains by 2, definitely one another should lose by 2. It's not the case always. It can lead to the aspect of a voluntary exchange of trade. Voluntary exchange means own. So you are not being forced, but you are doing from your own. So he said it's a positive sum game. Positive sum game means in zero sum game, the total remains the same. In a positive sum game, the total increases. That means earlier it was 100. Now X country have done 2 business. Y have done 4 business. So now the total is 100 plus 202 plus 406. So earlier it was 100. Now it is 106. So the total have increased. So it is called as a positive sum game. So it is a better theory which contradicted the theory of mercantilism and says that mercantilism talks about zero sum game and voluntary exchange trade talks about the aspect of positive sum game. So coming to the next theory, right, which is the theory of absolute advantage. You just go through the parts which had been highlighted. The capability of one country to produce more of a product with the same amount of input than another country. So which is being talking about the competitive advantage. In today's age, we talk about competitive advantage. This is the same thing which Adam Smith had referred to in the theory of absolute advantage 200 years back. That means my input cost will be same, but my output will improve. So if my input is same and output improves, that means my productivity will improve. If my productivity improves, then definitely it is a better condition. So this better condition is what organizations look for. So this theory of absolute advantage, so it's the advantage which is being provided, and it says that I am capable of producing more with the same input. That means my productivity is more. It also says the ability of the country to produce goods using fewer resources than any other country. That means the opportunity cost should be low. When we talked about India and China, we talked about that China, the cost of production is very, very, very less. As a result of which, many organizations outsource their production to China. So for China, the USP is their cost of production is less since they are more efficient in handling manpower, their technical skills, whatever. But when we talk about quality, then there is some controversies. Although you can debate with me, all of you, that when we talk about any product, whether it's Dell, HP, or something, it is being produced in China only. But as per the guidelines which are being set up by the aspect of that specific organization. So this is a competitive advantage which India and China are fighting for, right? What COVID have provided as an advantage to India is a different issue. But if COVID would have not been there, from that situation, China was having a competitive advantage of technology. Maybe India was having a competitive advantage with certain manpower. So ultimately, that needs to be balanced out, and ultimately, which country will be winning? Who will produce more with the same input, or sometimes less input? Sometimes the input will be less, as a result of which the output was also more. So it's a more better condition. That means the country is more strong. That means the country lead to some different aspects. So that's the aspect of the theory of absolute advantage. Now, when you talk about the theory of absolute advantage, it destroys the concept of mercantilist idea, since there are gains which will be utilized by both the countries due to exchange. It also questions the objective of national governments to acquire wealth through restrictive trade policies. We talked about a bit earlier about the protection which a country need to provide to its own homegrown organizations. It debates with that because ultimately you produce better product with less cost, productivity more, grow. That's the aspect of this theory of absolute advantage. So it is contradicting both the mercantilism theory, that is the total wealth, as well as the aspect of protectionism. It also measures a nation's wealth by the living standards of its people. So ultimately, theory of absolute advantage measures a nation's wealth by the living standard of the people. That's a very important parameter. It takes care of the total population of the country while deciding on the structure, on the level of any country. So that's the aspect of the theory of absolute advantage. I'm just discussing a very simple example, and maybe my time will be over. So I will be discussing this theory of absolute advantage. These are the two related theories, and if time allows, then I will be going for the comparative advantage. So please go through this example. Say two products are produced and machines and clothes are there. Labor is fixed, homogeneous, that means same within a country. The only factor of production and is fully utilized. So technology, production costs are constant, transportation costs are zero, and the countries barter for goods. That means there is a barter system. So what are constant? The technology is constant, the production cost is constant, and labor is constant. If you go to the next page about the table, we can. Now we talked about the European Union and we talked about India. If you see the top, you are finding that. Just 1 minute. You are finding one which is the case for both the countries, for both the category of products. One category is machines, one category is cloth. So there are two categories of product. For these two categories, what is constant? It is 1 person per day of labor. That means per day one labor is basically producing. This is fixed for both machines as well as cloth as well as both the countries. And the ultimate output is in European Union the number of machines which are produced are 5, and in India the number of machines which are produced are 2. But in case of cloth, you are finding 10 years of cloth are being produced in India and 15 years of cloth are produced in case of India. Fine. So my question to you is that by going through this simple table, I want to know in case of machines, who is the country which is more stronger, and in case of cloth, who is the which is the country which is more stronger. You can unmute your mics and please respond.
Sir, in case of machines, the European Union is more stronger, and in case of clothes, India is much stronger,
Okay.
as per the data given.
As per the data given. Why you have said? Because of the output, right?
Because of the output.
Sure. Do you agree technically, logically?
Yeah,
For
it is
cloth,
just simple.
It is just simple, right? So what it says is that it's a very, very simple maths, which basically says that in case of European Union, the number of machines which are being produced are 5 and 2, so it's a 2.5 times. So European Union is strong, but it is 10 for European Union, the cloth, 15 years of cloth. So for cloth, the aspect of the India is more strong. So this is an absolute beautiful example of theory of absolute advantage, because the countries are same, the labor input is same, but for two different products, two countries are performing in two different ways. What I have shared, what I have just depends on the product category. So for the cloth category, India is in a better position, and for machines category, European Union is in a better position. So it's absolute advantage. So although mercantilism theory is a very popular theory, but there were a lot of contradictions, a lot of theorists who have contradicted and came with the aspect of theory of absolute advantage by Adam Smith, and which says that ultimately it's not a zero-sum game, it's a positive sum game. So overall valuation will increase and improve, as a result of which overall wealth will improve. So from zero-sum game, this says it is a positive sum game. If it would have been a negative sum game, then it would have been different. But this is a positive sum game, which is very, very, very important for, right? So I will end today here, and I'll just stop sharing. Okay. If you have any doubt, you can